Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch and to my kitchen, where we are going to turn some beautiful spring rhubarb into 3 delicious recipes. We are going to make a rhubarb chutney, and this chutney is absolutely delicious on soft goat cheese, or if you don't like goat cheese, any other soft spreadable cheese, even a cream cheese. We're also going to make a rhubarb jam, and this is a little bit of a twist on the rhubarb jam that I usually make. This recipe is out of the Food in Jars book, and it has Earl Grey tea in it. And I am a huge fan of Earl Grey tea. I drink Earl Grey tea every day, and I have for years and years. So I'm excited to have a jam that has a little Earl Grey tea in it. And then we're going to make a straight up stewed rhubarb recipe. This rhubarb recipe that I'm going to share with you could not be simpler, and it is absolutely delicious and has so many different applications, which we'll talk about when we get into making that recipe. We're going to start with the chutney recipe this morning because the chutney recipe has to cook down for at least an hour to an hour and a half in order to thicken up. So we're going to get that one going and over on the stove cooking down, and then we'll get into the rest of our recipes. So now that we have all the rhubarb up at the house, I do have it washed and I have the ends cut off. So rhubarb has little ends that look like this. So we want to remove those ends and put those to the side, and you can compost those, and then we have beautiful red rhubarb. In my last video where I was talking about rhubarb, somebody mentioned that they had always been taught to peel the rhubarb. I have never in my life peeled rhubarb, never noticed any difference. I think one thing that you might find is when you stew rhubarb, sometimes there can be some stringy pieces, and that is likely from the skin. So if you don't like that, you could probably peel your rhubarb. The disadvantage of peeling beautiful red rhubarb like this is you lose a lot of that gorgeous red color. And that's one of the things I do love about rhubarb. The other thing about rhubarb, if you've never had it before, is it is extremely sour. So one of the kind of childhood treats that a lot of people talk about when I share about rhubarb here is that they used to take rhubarb and then dip it in sugar and bite it. I'm sure I did that as a child as well. I don't remember doing that, but I'm sure that I did. So rhubarb is one of those things that does need sugar in order to counter that really sour flavor. But the thing to keep in mind whenever you're making a jam or any type of condiment that calls for a lot of sugar is that usually you're only using a tablespoon or so, or maybe 2 tablespoons of that condiment. So it's not like you're eating all the sugar that's in the recipe all at once, because most jam recipes call for equal amount of whatever fruit you're using to sugar, which can be a lot. So I have all of our gorgeous rhubarb here, all prepared and ready to go. Oh, there's one more that needs the end cut off. And we need 6 cups of chopped rhubarb for this recipe. I hope I have enough rhubarb here for all of these recipes. So we're gonna need 6 cups, and we're gonna use a large saucepan. This is a little bit overkill for the size of saucepan you need, but the other saucepan that's over there I'm going to use for the jam. I actually should get some more smaller ones that size, but most of the ones I have in my house are really big like this. So that's what we're gonna use. So you don't have to get too carried away with the size that you're cutting them. This is the average size I cut mine for most rhubarb recipes, because it is going to just cook down and soften and it will come apart anyway. So this seems to be a good size for them to cook down fairly quickly. This one is a 4-cup measure, and we need 6 cups for this recipe. I don't make a ton of chutney because we don't need a ton of it, but I like to have at least a few jars, and this is gonna do 4 pints. I'll show you what a pint jar looks like. That is this size of a jar here. And for those of you that are new here, you can probably see out the window. I know it's hard to see because it kind of whites out with the camera, but you can see that we have a deck that is ripped apart out there. That is our project for the next couple of weeks, as we are rebuilding our deck. Our house was built in the early 1970s, and we live in a log house, you can see, and we just had the outside of the house refinished, the logs, because they were in desperate need of it. And I learned something from the log refinishers, and they said that a log house really should be attended to every couple of years. So it doesn't need to be stripped right down the way that we had to do because we had been negligent with the care of it, but it does need to be have a fresh coat of stain or whatever top coat that you put on. And then any spots that there's rot or anything like that attended to. Fortunately, because we live in such a dry climate, our logs are not degrading very quickly. So even though the house is over 50 years old, it is holding up really beautifully. So there was only a few spots that they had to do any kind of repairs on. But anyway, our deck also needed to be refinished or redone, rebuilt. So we are doing that over the next couple of weeks, and I'll make sure to give you guys a tour when we get that all done, because we're doing some other things with the flower gardens around the house that I'm really excited about. I haven't been able to do a ton of work outside over the last couple of days because it has been raining like crazy, which I'm not complaining about. It has been very dry here, so I'm happy to have the rain, but I haven't been able to get outside and do a lot of work. So I didn't do my garden tour last week. I've been trying to do a garden tour every week because there wasn't a lot going on, but there will be this week. I have so much going on in the garden because I have to plant a ton. Our last frost date isn't until around June 2nd up here, but there's still quite a few cooler crops that I have needed to get in the garden, like my potatoes. I got lots of those planted in between the rainfall. And I have all my onions to plant and the brassicas, lots of stuff. All right, there we go. There is our 6 cups of beautiful red rhubarb. We are going to do 3 cups of onion, some beautiful onion here, my trusty onion eye protection. So for this recipe, you can use any kind of onion that you like. I prefer a sweeter onion, so like a red onion like these, or a Spanish sweet onion, something with a little sweetness to it. But if you like a little bit more of a peppery flavor in your chutneys, then you can use a stronger onion. And if you like a little bit of texture in your chutney, you can do some bigger chunks of onion if you like. All right, 3 cups of onion. 1 cup of raisins. So you can omit the raisins if you're not a fan, but I think it tastes really good, especially with soft cheese. So, so good. 3 cups of light brown sugar, 2 cups of apple cider vinegar, we need a tablespoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ginger. We'll just put all of it in there. A half a teaspoon or a little pinch of red pepper flakes, and some ground cloves. So this recipe calls for half a teaspoon of ground cloves, but I am just gonna add about 1/8 a teaspoon of ground cloves because I don't like too strong of a clovey flavor, and a half a teaspoon of mustard seed. So we want to cook this down for around an hour or so, but what we're looking for, I guess I can take these off, is we're wanting it to start to thicken. So not just the chutney itself, but the syrup that's at the bottom. We want to make sure that that starts thickening and getting kind of like a thick maple syrup, and then we know it's ready to jar up. It smells really good. Alrighty, now we'll let that cook down and we will start on our jam. We're gonna want to get a different cutting board because this has onion all over it, and we do not want an oniony flavored jam. I'm gonna wash my knife too. So for this recipe, we need 8 cups of chopped rhubarb, I have 4 different rhubarb patches in my garden, and I think I could plant some more because every year I always think to myself, you know, I could use some more rhubarb. I ran out of my stewed rhubarb this year, which is one of my favorite recipes to have on the pantry shelf, and I think I might potentially have to buy some rhubarb, which would be so strange. So yes, I'm gonna plant some more. Now's the perfect time in spring to plant rhubarb. Okay, there we go. 8 cups of rhubarb, 1 cup of Earl Grey tea. So this is a strong Earl Grey tea that has been sitting here and it smells really good. So we're gonna dump that in there. We are going to add 4 cups of organic cane sugar. And then we're going to cook this until it is soft over on the stove, which should take about 15 to 20 minutes. I could definitely use a 6-burner stove. When this one kicks the bucket, we are going to put in a larger stove with 2 ovens because I could really use one. But this is the perfect time to share with you about the steam canner. I've talked about the steam canner many times before, but for those that are new here, this is a steam canner, so it cans using steam. As you can see, compared to a water bath canner, it uses significantly less water than a water bath canner, takes a lot less time to heat up, and heats your house up, or doesn't heat your house up as badly as a water bath canner. So I almost use this exclusively now for any recipe that I would normally or used to water bath can. I think I might have this in my Amazon store. I am terrible at keeping my Amazon store updated. I apologize for that, but I do believe I have this one in there. If not, it's the Fruit Saver brand, and it has been working very well for me. The only thing that I would say that you got to keep your eye out with is that you're keeping an eye on this canner, because the water will boil away. And I have done that more than once, as you can tell by the black on the inside of my canner. I've burnt it a few times. So do keep an eye on that and just make sure if you're doing anything that takes a long time to steam can, say tomatoes, that can take up to 45 minutes to steam can, you may need to add extra water to it, or just make sure that you have enough water in there that it doesn't boil away in that time period. So I'm just going to give this a stir, turn up our heat a little bit so that we can get it going. Oh my goodness, that smells so delicious. We use something different to stir our jam, since that's gonna have that onion flavor. I don't have a ton of rhubarb left here for a large batch of plain stewed rhubarb, but I did happen to buy some strawberries at the grocery store. So I think what I'm gonna do is give these a wash and do a rhubarb strawberry sauce. So not like a jam, so I'm not gonna be adding pectin to it. This is going, as rhubarb strawberry jam is really delicious as well, but I'm just going to make these as stewed rhubarb and strawberries, and this will be a topping for ice cream, for yogurt. I use this and just the straight up stewed rhubarb as well when I'm making baked oatmeal. I add it to a lot of things, muffins, all kinds of stuff. It is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Versatile, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a very versatile ingredient to have in your pantry. Did I ever tell you guys about the mincemeat that I made? Actually, I think I might have even made this mincemeat on my channel. In fact, I probably did. If I did, I'll find the video for you so you can see how much I made. I had a ton of green tomatoes, and somebody suggested that I try mincemeat. And I've had mincemeat before, and I don't love mincemeat, but I don't mind it, and I thought I could use it in all kinds of things. And so I made a huge batch of it. So my entire large 20-quart roaster oven, I filled to the top, ended up with probably 25 jars of mincemeat. Turns out my family doesn't like mincemeat, especially not green tomato mincemeat, which I'm sure seems like that would be obvious. But anyway, those sat on my shelves for at least 3 years down in my pantry before, because I hate throwing food away, especially food like that I've put into jars, because it's a lot of effort. And I figured I would find something to do with it, but no, I didn't. So I finally, I think it was last fall, decided to just throw it away. I ended up giving it to the chickens, or maybe it was the pigs, I can't remember. So it didn't entirely go to waste. So needless to say, I have learned to try small batches of things, which seems like it would probably be also obvious that you wouldn't want to make 20 jars of something that you don't know if your family's going to like or not. But I have heard from lots of people over the years that have done that, tried something, and then they just didn't end up liking it. And also, home canned food can often taste a lot better than store-bought food, but it can have a very different kind of flavor. So you could like something that you buy canned from the grocery store, and then you make it at home and it tastes very different than what you're getting at the store, which most of the time is a really positive thing, but sometimes it cannot be. So I know that there's a lot of people that have made things like homemade ketchup or things like that that they just didn't end up liking. There, I think that's enough strawberries. We'll leave the rest of those for snacking. Oh my goodness, that chutney just smells incredible over there. So we are going to cook all of this down. Just gonna chop up my rhubarb here. And all we're going to do to this is add enough sugar to sweeten it a little bit. These strawberries are fairly sweet, so I don't think I'll have to add too much. But we'll add some sugar and then a little bit of lemon juice, and then we're just going to let it cook down until it thickens on its own. And then we will jar it up just like that. So it could not be simpler. And you can do just straight up rhubarb if you want, or adding fruit to it like these strawberries here. I don't have to measure these, but just to get them out of the way, I'll put them in the measuring cup. For the jam that we're making over there, it calls for pectin for thickening. And I use Pomona's pectin here. So this is a pectin that you can use all different kinds of sweeteners for it. It doesn't require large amounts of sugar like regular pectin does. But one of the things about this is that you do need to mix the pectin in with a little bit of the sugar that's going to go into your recipe. And I forgot to pull out some of the sugar, or not add some of the sugar to my jam over there before. So I have two choices. I can either add a little bit of extra sugar to the recipe and add the pectin so that I have a thicker jam, or I can just cook it down until it starts to thicken on its own. Rhubarb and strawberries, for that matter, are fairly low natural pectin fruit, so they do either require a longer cooking time with the sugars, and the sugars will help thicken it, or they need an added pectin. If you have access to crab apples have a lot of natural pectin in them. Even straight up apples do as well, but crab apples are really high in pectin, and then you can add some of that to your jam if you don't want to be adding pectin to it, or say you don't have pectin or whatever. So the rhubarb Earl Grey jam that I have going back there, I'm just going to let it cook down for its 20 minutes or so and then taste it. And if it's not too sweet, then I'll probably add a little bit of the sugar, add extra sugar and add it to my pectin here. If it is too sweet already, then I'll probably just cook it down a bit and have a little bit of a runnier jam. I personally don't mind a bit of a runnier jam. The only kind of issue with it is if you're going to put it on toast or something, it can make the toast a little bit soggy is the wrong word. I wouldn't say soggy unless your jam is really runny, but a little bit soggier than it would be if it was a really thick jam that was thickened with pectin. So just kind of a personal choice there. Oh man, I was so ready for spring, friends. Just to be able to taste fresh fruit and have food coming out of my garden is so fantastic. And by the way, for those that have been following along with my asparagus journey, I am getting asparagus every day. And so I'm actually going to be freeze drying asparagus, and I have enough jars of the pickled asparagus now that I don't have to can any more of it. But I do want to preserve it because we're getting such a great harvest. So what I did last year was actually covered my asparagus bed with silage tarp. I think it was a silage tarp, it might have been weed barrier, and left it covered all season because it was absolutely infested with grass and I just couldn't get on top of it. And I just decided that if I did end up killing all the asparagus that was in there, that I would just start a fresh bed somewhere else. But it came up better than it has for years this year. So I don't know if that's a strategy that I'm going to use, where I just wait till the asparagus comes up and then cut it down and then cover the bed until the following spring with a tarp. But I'll decide that a little later on in the season. Okay, we're going to give this a try and see if we can get away with adding a little bit more sugar. with that bergamot tea in there, you guys, this is so good. So I'm also going to add some vanilla. The recipe calls for vanilla bean, which I do not have. So I'm going to add a nice teaspoon of vanilla to that. Going to add a good tablespoon of lemon juice, using fresh lemon juice, and maybe even a little bit of zest in this would kind of elevate it, make it a little fancier tasting. We're gonna add a pinch of salt, a little bit more. Okay, so to jamify this, we are going to take our Pomonas pectin. And the way Pomonas pectin works is there is 2 different steps to it. So we have our pectin here, and then we have our calcium here, and we're gonna make calcium water with this. Every year I have to check how to do this. I actually remember the recipe. So this is 100% pure citrus pectin, by the way. And the best thing about this pectin is that you can adjust the amount of sugar. So I could have added far less sugar to this if I had wanted to. It will still work its magic and thicken your jam with less, and you can use honey. I might have mentioned that already, but with regular regular pectin, you can't usually do that. So a half a teaspoon of this calcium powder into half a cup of water. And you can actually make up a batch of this and then leave it in the fridge for jam making season, because you only need a couple teaspoons of the calcium water in each recipe. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of our calcium water to our jam mixture here. Bring that back over to our heat. We're going to add half a cup more of sugar, and then 2 teaspoons of our pectin into our sugar, and then we're going to mix this up really well. And then once our jam comes back up to a boil over there, we're going to add this and then boil it vigorously for around a minute. And you can do a jam test if you like, and that's where you can put a plate in the freezer, pull the plate out, put a little bit of your jam on the plate, and then let it cool quickly. It'll cool quickly because the plate's frozen, and then you can run your finger through it. And if your finger makes a track through it that doesn't fill right back in, right away from your jam, then you're good to go. Or you can even just take a little bit, put it on a plate, throw it in the freezer, and then do the same thing. I'm going to turn our heat up a little bit, add our sugar and our pectin. We're already thickening up nicely. That's beautiful. Get our jars ready. This should do 4 pint jars. So 3/4 of an inch of headspace or so. It almost never happens that I get the right or the exact amount that the recipe says. So this recipe says that that it would make 4 pints, and I got 3 and 2/3 of a jar. And that is very typical with canning recipes, because the fruit that you're using or the vegetables you're using can have a different level of moisture in them. You could measure just slightly off where you're not quite filling the cup measure up. So it's pretty typical just to be aware of that, to end up with slightly less. Usually is what happens. It's slightly less than the recipe calls for. But that is fine. This is really nice looking jam. Happy with that. So now we're going to wash our rims, and I am going to use a little bit of vinegar. In my last video, I was sharing with you in more detail about canning, specifically pressure canning in that video. And I talked about how if I'm canning something that has a lot of sugar in it, I usually use vinegar when I am wiping off the rims, just to help cut through that stickiness. I can jam for 10 minutes in a water bath or a steam canner. Got those all cleaned off. Because I was just making jam in this, I'm not going to bother washing it out, and I'm going to bring it over for us to add our strawberries and our rhubarb to, and then get the canner on the stove and get these canned up. So if you are going to make this chutney or any other high sugar recipe that requires a long cooking time, usually for the first half an hour, it's fine. You can just stir it every once in a while. But once it starts to really thicken, like this chutney is starting to do now, you want to keep a really close eye on it because it is likely to scorch due to that high sugar quantity and the fact that it's getting thick really fast at this point. So when I am standing here and I'm stirring, I crank my heat up a little bit so I don't have to stand here and stir for too long. And then just get everything kind of boiling very vigorously. Do be careful as well because this can spit a little bit, and because it's sugar, it will end up burning you. So just be aware of that as well. This is almost there, almost to the point where it's the thickness that I am going for. Actually, you know what? Since this is just about ready to go, I'm just gonna move these jars. I can fit 7 in here. So I will can up the chutney with the jam at the same time. Another thing that chutney is really good on is pork. Really good on a pork chop. Okay, I am gonna call that done. Let's get that jarred up. This one is also supposed to make 4 pints, so we'll see if we get there. Oh, we might get there. That one was perfect, exactly 4. You can use straight up vinegar on your cloth or put a little water in a bowl, depending on how many you're having to wash off, and just add some vinegar and water. It can be diluted a bit. And into our canner. Now we're just going to wait for this to come up to temperature. Your steam canner will have a gauge on the top, and it will tell you based on your elevation, at least this one does, when you are kind of in this case, it's in the dark green. That's where I need to be. And once the gauge hits that, that's when I set my timer. So now we're going to add our rhubarb and our strawberries, and you could use this for a jam. I'm gonna make it runnier, so it's more like a sauce, but you could add pectin to it and use it as a jam. I'm gonna add a little bit of lemon juice. The lemon juice does have a preservation factor and a little bit of a flavor factor, but it does help to preserve the vibrant color of jams, and that's the reason that I use it. I'm gonna add, I don't know, probably 3 cups of sugar to this. Going to cook it down, and then I'll taste it and I'll decide if it is sweet enough. And if it isn't, I'll add a little bit more. Add a pinch of salt. I'm going to add some vanilla to this as well. So I really liked the vanilla flavor of that jam I made. Now we'll throw this on the stove. We'll basically do the same thing, cook it down for around 20 minutes, and then jar it up. And while that is canning and cooking down over there, I'll use that as an opportunity to clean up my mess. The nice thing about doing small batch canning like this is that there's just not a huge mess. Like my big batch canning days, it can take as much time to clean the kitchen after doing it as it does actually doing it. I love doing large batch canning days where I can sometimes up to a couple hundred jars over a day or two because of just the feeling of satisfaction. It's kind of just a one and done. But I do really enjoy doing small batch canning days too. Small batch things like this are a little bit funner to make because they're a little bit more creative. When I'm doing large batch canning days, like I did the other day when I did all that meat, it's kind of like one product, and they're usually ingredients, not recipes unto themselves. So it's fun to do these small batch days too. I guess the truth is I just like canning any old way. So I'm just going to set this extra pectin aside and jar up the calcium water, and I'll just pop that in the fridge. And then I can use it for my next batch. Our jam and our chutney are done here. And I do like to let my canners cool down a little bit before I take my product out. Siphoning is not as much of an issue with jam as it is with products that have more liquid in them. So siphoning is when the liquid comes up out of the jar when there's a dramatic change in temperature. So it's a good idea to try to wait until your jars have cooled down a little bit before you take them out of the canner. And I do believe our strawberry rhubarb sauce here, oh, it smells delicious, oh my gosh. Looks good. So I did use a potato masher and I mashed the strawberries up a little bit so it was more syrupy, not with so many chunks in it. So I think I'm going to call that good enough. So I'm going to guess probably 4 and a little bit pints here. So you can use this to top plain yogurt with. So yummy. One of my favorite childhood memories is of my mom canning. My mom loved to can. She still loves to can. She really loved to can when she was young. And she would get so excited when the lids would ping. And I do find I have Bernardin lids here, and I also have 4 jars lids, or 1 4 jars lids. So the 4 jars lids are thicker, so they don't tend to snap or make that like popping sound the same way that the Bernardin lids, because they're a little bit thinner. So if you don't hear them, if you're using 4 jars lids and you don't hear that snapping sound, that's why. It's just because they're a thicker lid. We're going to do the same thing now with these and can them for 10 minutes, and I'll be back with you when we're done and show you all the finished products. All right, our last batch is done. And look at how pretty that looks. Isn't that beautiful? So that one's the strawberry rhubarb sauce. So for these jars that aren't filled all the way, they'll be fine on the pantry shelf for a couple of months. But I'll eat those, or we'll eat those ones up first. Anything that has that much headspace in it, it just doesn't last as long in the pantry. So one of the other things you could do is just pop those ones right in the fridge and eat them right away. So let me show you what all of these look like. That one is our chutney, strawberry Earl Grey jam. And then I showed you the strawberry rhubarb. Whoa, it just got really windy out there. The strawberry rhubarb sauce that I just did. That is another 12 jars for the 2025 pantry. If you would like to grab a copy of my canning guide, it's fairly comprehensive. There's water bath, pressure canning, and steam canning in there, along with a couple of recipes. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is down in the pinned comment below. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.